All right, let's learn about soft proofing, which is a way to better predict how our image will look when it's on a piece of paper from a particular printer. And we're going to start by doing a little bit of this right here in Lightroom. I've already done some editing. I'm going to switch over to Develop module. And as I do, I want to remind you that there are certain preferences you should always have set in Lightroom. So I'm going to go up to the Lightroom Classic menu and down to Preferences. And I'll zoom in here just a second to show that I always edit. My external editing is set to work in TIFF. Very critical, the color space should be in Adobe RGB 1998. And my compression is set to none. I also have this set to externally edit as a 16-bit channel image. If this is the first time you have set these options, once you close this, you may want to restart Lightroom so that they stick. Now I'm going to go over, I've already done some editing on this image. You can see I've got a lot of bright colors in here. They look terrific on my screen. I'm not positive that they're going to look that way out of this printer on this piece of paper. Oftentimes vibrant colors like that exceed the boundaries of what the printer is able to reproduce. And that range of color that it can reproduce is called the gamut. To get started here, in the Develop module, I'm going to go to down near the bottom here of my image. There's a little option right here called Soft Proofing. And I'm going to turn this on, this little checkbox. That opens up underneath my histogram a little set of options here. One of my options is my profile. If I open this up, you see that by default I've got sRGB display profile Adobe RGB. I previously didn't have this one, but you can go to Other to select from any printing profiles you have installed on your machine. Now, I'm not at school. I don't have access to my top-notch Epson P800 printer. I've just had my little desktop printer. These are the options that I've got, but I can turn on as many different profiles as I want to appear in this menu. Let's say we just turn on those two. When I say OK and I go back to this menu, you can see that both of those options are there. I'm going to choose the Premium Luster profile. Next below that I have the rendering intent, and this will determine how colors get shifted by the printer when they are out of gamut. I usually print with relative as my intent. Next option down is Simulate Paper and Ink. Watch the image when I turn this on and you will see that the image gets just slightly dimmed and dulled down to better approximate what an image looks like on real paper as opposed to light pumping out of a monitor. They are a little bit apples to oranges comparisons. Okay, having turned that on, I get a little bit better idea what my image is going to look like on my paper. But so far I'm not seeing any gamut warning. I'm going to go ahead and open this image now to Photoshop. And I'm going to do that by going to the Photo menu, Edit in, and Open as a Smart Object in Photoshop. And now the image is open in Photoshop. I only have the one layer so far. It is a smart object, so if I need to double click back in there and do any global edits, I can. I'm going to go to now the View menu and go to Proof Setup. Oftentimes your proof setup will be the working CMYK profile. What we're going to do is, instead of that, go to Custom and open up this Custom Proof dialog. And in here we have this area that says Device to Simulate. Again, by default, this is likely going to be set to whatever your working CMYK is by default. What we're going to do is switch this and choose from this menu whatever color profile we're going to print with. And I might have to scroll down a little bit here, but I'm going to go to my SPR 280 Premium Luster as my profile. I'm going to keep my rendering intent as relative. I'm going to turn on my black point compensation if it's not already on, and I'm going to simulate paper color. Again, there's that dimming down that you see that happens to the image to simulate the paper white. And click OK. So again, now I'm looking at my image as it's probably going to be printed, but it's still not showing me where my colors are out of the gamut, outside of the range of colors that my printer can produce. So before I go any further, I'm going to go to the View menu and down to Gamut Warning and click this to turn on Gamut Warning. Now what we're going to see is, and it's not too bad, there's a few little areas here that are in gray. They look gray. And those are areas that are not going to print exactly how I see them on screen. They're just a little bit out of the range of color the printer can produce. Now, it's not like they're going to turn out gray on my print. They're going to look close to those colors, but not exactly those colors. So if I'm worried about that and I want to deal with that range of color, what I can do is desaturate those colors a little bit or decrease their vibrance. Now, the first thing I'm going to show you is not the way you want to do this. If I open up a hue saturation layer, let's say, and I bring down the saturation, if you watch these gray colors, you can see they change a little bit and eventually they go away. Okay, I have no more gray on that purple balloon. But the overall image looks really desaturated. I've lost a lot of the intensity of color. So I'm kind of throwing out the baby with the bathwater there. If I bring this back up, I could also try bringing down luminance or bringing up luminance. Oh, bringing up luminance actually got rid of those. But again, my overall image looks kind of washed out, desaturated. So that's really not a good way to go. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to bring up a vibrance adjustment layer. And before I start adjusting vibrance, well, let me just show you. If I bring down vibrance, I am getting rid of those areas of gamut warning, but I'm also de-vibrancing the entire image. I'm going to adjust the mask, which right now is all white. And if you'll notice up here in the properties area where I can adjust my vibrance and saturation, there's another little thing that's about adjusting the mask. And if I click on that, these are things that allow me to affect the mask itself. And one of those things down here happens to be color range. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on color range. And a lot of times by default, this will say something like sampled colors or something. We're going to choose out of gamut in case that wasn't already chosen. You'll see now that the mask that it shows me is white only in the areas where the colors are hitting that limit of what the printer can produce. And I'm going to go ahead and click OK. The mask in my layers palette now reflects those areas. Those are only the areas that are out of gamut that are going to be affected. And if I go back now to this icon in my properties area, now I'm looking back again at the adjustment, the vibrance and saturation, and I'm just going to start bringing down the vibrance. And the idea here is that it's not bringing down the vibrance of the entire image, it's only bringing down the vibrance of those areas that are a little bit out of gamut. And so overall my image looks pretty much the same. I've just controlled a few areas that are a bit beyond what the printer could handle. If I turn on and off this layer, you'll see there's before, there's all the gray indicating a gamut warning. I turn it back on and that gray has disappeared. I mean all but a couple little dots, which I'm not that concerned about. And so basically I'm ready to go. I'm ready to print for that particular profile. This layer that I've created is not something that I would permanently bake into the image. I'm going to leave that as a separate layer and I might turn it off. I might save without that layer. This layer is really only to help my image when I'm printing on this particular printer for that particular paper to make sure that my gamut warning or my colors are within the gamut. If I'm printing on a different printer, a different type of paper, this vibrance layer may be not worth anything. I might want to get rid of it. I might want to add a different one and adjust it differently. But that's all set to go, and then you're ready to print.